On her 20th wedding anniversary, Victoria Sterling sat alone in the Sterling House, a five-star
I
restaurant
don't
on Manhattan's
understand.
Upper East Side, where
We were
crystal
so happy.
chandeliers cast amber light across white
This is
linen,
my
and
husband.
couples leaned close over candlelit tables. 7 months pregnant, she'd chosen a beige Armani maternity dress that whispered, rather than announced, paired with her grandmother's pearl earrings jewelry Brandon had never noticed because it didn't carry a designer logo. The baby kicked against her ribs as if sensing her mother's quiet disappointment. Henry Brooks, the maitre d', who'd worked at this establishment for 15 years, approached with that particular expression reserved for wives who waited alone at anniversary dinners. A mixture of pity and professional discretion that Victoria had seen too many times before. His voice carried the practiced gentleness of someone delivering bad news they'd delivered before. "Mrs. Sterling, your husband called to say he'll be late again." Victoria looked up from her phone, meeting Henry's sympathetic gaze. The classical piano drifted through the restaurant, an American jazz piece that seemed almost too melancholy for the moment. Around her, the soft clink of crystal glasses and murmured conversations of couples who had actually shown up for their reservations created a symphony of normal relationships, the kind where partners valued each other's time, where anniversaries meant something more than just another day to work late. She placed her hand unconsciously on her belly, feeling the baby's movements. 20 years. She thought about the number as she sipped her sparkling water bubbles, tickling her nose. 20 years of marriage to Brandon Sterling, and she couldn't remember the last anniversary he'd been on time for. Actually, that wasn't true. She could remember. It was their 5th anniversary, back when Sterling Industries was still struggling, back when Brandon needed her emotional support and the mysterious cash injections that kept appearing just when the company needed them most. The candle on her table flickered, casting shadows across the empty place setting opposite her. The waiter had discreetly removed the second-place setting after the first hour, but Victoria had asked him to put it back. Hope, she supposed, was the last thing to die in a marriage. Her phone vibrated against the white tablecloth. Brandon's name flashed on the screen. For a moment, Victoria considered not answering, but 20 years of conditioning won out. His voice was sharp, impatient, the same tone he used with junior executives who disappointed him or vendors who didn't deliver on time. "Victoria, something came up at the office. Big expansion discussion with the West Coast branch. You understand." In the background, Victoria heard it. Feminine laughter, high and tinkling like champagne glasses touching. Then music, but not the kind played in offices. This was club music, bass thumping through Brandon's phone. She heard the distinct sound of a champagne cork popping, followed by more of that feminine laughter. Drake's voice pulsed underneath it all. She kept her voice measured, educated, hiding the exhaustion that had settled into her bones like lead. 20 years of practice had made her an expert at hiding her true feelings. "Of course, Brandon, the expansion is important." He hung up without saying goodbye, without mentioning their anniversary, without asking about the baby, without even pretending to care anymore. The server approached with a dessert plate. New York cheesecake with a delicate sugar sculpture on top, artfully crafted to look like two swans with necks intertwined. His voice was soft. "Compliments of the house, Mrs. Sterling, for your special day." Victoria smiled, though it didn't reach her eyes. Her eyes, Brandon used to say, were like melted chocolate, warm and inviting. Now they were just tired. "How thoughtful. Please thank the chef for me." As she sat there, surrounded by happy couples celebrating their own milestones, her phone buzzed with a notification. A social media alert. Brandon's executive assistant, Jennifer, had tagged him in photos. Jennifer was young, ambitious, and completely unaware that her boss's wife followed her Instagram account under a pseudonym. Victoria knew she shouldn't look, but her finger moved of its own accord, drawn by the same morbid curiosity that made people slow down at accident scenes. There he was, her millionaire husband, though she was already thinking of him as her soon-to-be ex-husband, with his arms wrapped around a young woman named Scarlett Monroe. The timestamp showed 15 minutes ago. The location, Eclipse, Manhattan, the city's most exclusive nightclub where membership alone cost more than most people's annual salary. In the photo, Brandon's hand rested low on Scarlett's back. Too low for a business meeting, too intimate for a casual acquaintance. Scarlett was everything Victoria wasn't anymore. 23 years old, blonde thin in that way that suggested she lived on green juice and overpriced salads, wearing a dress that cost more than most people's monthly rent and left nothing to the imagination. Victoria took a slow, measured breath, a technique she'd learned in the prenatal yoga classes she attended alone while Brandon was supposedly in board meetings. She studied the photo more carefully. Behind Brandon and Scarlett, she could see other Sterling Industries executives, all raising glasses in what looked like a celebration. The West Coast expansion apparently required champagne and models. The waiter returned, hovering discreetly. Would Madam like anything else? Victoria's voice remained steady despite the earthquake happening inside her chest. Just the check, please. As she signed the credit card receipt, Brandon's credit card, which would soon be cut off if she had anything to say about it, Victoria made a mental note to call her lawyer in the morning. Not Brandon's lawyer, not the family lawyer who handled their estate planning, but her lawyer, the one Brandon didn't know existed, just like he didn't know about so many other things. Henry appeared with her coat, a cashmere wrap that Brandon had given her for Christmas 5 years ago, back when he still bothered with gifts that weren't selected by his assistant. His voice was quiet as he helped her with the coat, a breach in professional protocol that surprised her. Mrs. Sterling, if I may say so, you deserve better. Victoria met his eyes, struck by the gentle certainty there. Henry had a daughter about her age, she remembered. He'd mentioned it once. Thank you, Henry. I'm beginning to believe you're right. As she stepped into the rainy Manhattan evening, her driver holding an umbrella over her head, Victoria Sterling made a mental note to call Patricia Morrison in the morning. Patricia was the best divorce attorney in New York, and more importantly, she specialized in high-net-worth divorces where one spouse had hidden assets. Because while Brandon thought he was married to a former secretary who should be grateful for his success, the truth was much more complicated. The rain pelted against the car windows as her driver navigated through the Manhattan traffic. Victoria placed her hand on her belly, feeling the baby move with strong, insistent kicks. It's just you and me now, little one, but don't worry. Mommy has been preparing for this day for a very long time. The coffee maker gurgled in the pristine kitchen of their Manhattan penthouse, a $15 million piece of real estate that Brandon loved to brag about at parties. Victoria sat at the breakfast bar, her laptop open to spreadsheets Brandon never knew she understood. The morning news played softly on the television, something about tech stocks that would have interested her more if she hadn't been calculating exactly how much her hidden empire was worth. The spreadsheets told a story Brandon had never bothered to read. Chen Technologies. She'd kept her mother's maiden name for the company, though Brandon had never asked about her mother's family, beyond confirming they couldn't contribute to the wedding costs. The company was now worth $800 million with subsidiaries in artificial intelligence, quantum computing, and biotech, all built while Brandon thought she spent her days at charity lunches and spa appointments. The private elevator chimed its sophisticated sound designed to be pleasant rather than jarring. Brandon walked in still wearing yesterday's Armani suit. His silver hair was slightly mussed, and he smelled of perfume that wasn't hers. The scent was expensive. She recognized it as Estee Lauder Sensuous, about $300 a bottle. Scarlett had expensive taste, apparently. He didn't meet her eyes as he poured himself coffee from the machine that cost more than most people's cars. Victoria, we need to talk about our arrangement. She closed her laptop slowly, deliberately, folding her hands over her pregnant belly. The baby was quiet this morning, as if sensing the tension in the room. Our arrangement, is that what we're calling our marriage now? Brandon's jaw tightened. He hated when she questioned him, especially with that calm, measured tone that made him feel like he was being analyzed. It was the same tone she'd used when she'd suggested he invest in certain tech startups, suggestions he'd laughed off until his golf buddies made the same recommendations months later after Victoria had already secured her own positions through shell companies. Don't be dramatic, you know what I mean. This situation isn't working anymore. His voice took on that patronizing quality he used with anyone he considered beneath him, which was almost everyone. A man in my position needs a certain type of partner, someone who understands the demands of the business world, someone who can keep up with the social requirements of being married to a CEO, someone who can be an asset, not a liability. Victoria almost laughed. If only he knew that she'd been the asset all along. That every major success Sterling Industries had achieved in the last 20 years had been orchestrated by her planned, through careful market manipulation and strategic investments that Brandon thought were lucky coincidences. The words tumbled out of him desperate and rehearsed. "We've grown apart, Victoria. You must see that. You've let yourself go." He gestured vaguely at her pregnant belly as if their child was evidence of her failure rather than their commitment. "You don't understand what it takes to maintain my image. When was the last time you came to a corporate event looking like someone who belongs on my arm?" Her reply was even immediate. 3 weeks ago, the Sterling Industries charity gala. I wore the Oscar de la Renta gown, the one you said made me look like I was trying too hard. I spoke with the Japanese investors about quantum computing applications, though you introduced me as your wife who dabbles in reading about tech. Brandon's face flushed. He hadn't expected her to remember the details. Certainly hadn't expected her to throw his words back at him. "That's exactly what I mean. You're passive-aggressive, Victoria. It's exhausting." She took a sip of her decaf tea, a special blend she imported from a small farm in North Carolina that cost $200 a pound. Brandon had complained about the expense until she told him it was from the grocery store. "I see many things, including the photos from Eclipse last night." His face went from flushed to pale in seconds. He hadn't expected her to know already. In 20 years of marriage he'd grown complacent, assuming Victoria was too naive, too trusting, too dependent to pay attention to his activities. His voice lacked conviction. "That's a business relationship." Victoria echoed his earlier words back to him, a technique she'd learned in the negotiation seminar she attended while Brandon thought she was at book club. "Is that what we're calling it? How long has this business relationship been going on? 3 months? 6? Brandon was quiet for a moment, and Victoria could see him calculating, trying to figure out how much she knew, how much he could lie about. Finally, his shoulders slumped slightly, and the admission hung in the air between them like a physical presence. 8 months. Victoria had been pregnant for 7, which meant he'd started his affair when they were supposedly trying for this baby, when he'd held her hand at the fertility clinic and promised they were in this together. Her hand moved protectively over her belly. "I see." The anger replaced his momentary vulnerability. "This is exactly what I mean. You're passive-aggressive, Victoria. You manipulate every conversation. You've let yourself go. You don't understand what it takes to maintain my image, to run a company like Sterling Industries. You sit here in this penthouse I pay for, living off my success, contributing nothing." Victoria stood slowly, her movements deliberate despite her advanced pregnancy. At 7 months, she moved with the careful grace of someone carrying precious cargo, which she was. Perhaps he was right, she thought. Things did need to change. He blinked, surprised by her agreement. In 20 years of marriage, Victoria had never agreed with him this easily, especially not about something this significant. Usually she fought quietly but persistently, wearing him down with logic and emotional appeals until he either gave in or stormed out. "Good. I'll have my lawyer contact yours. We can make this clean. The prenup is straightforward." She was already walking toward the bedroom they'd shared for 2 decades, not turning around. "Yes, let's definitely involve the lawyers. Patricia Morrison comes highly recommended." His voice cracked slightly. "You've already found a lawyer." Victoria paused at the doorway but didn't turn around. 8 months ago, Brandon." She disappeared into the bedroom, leaving him alone in the kitchen he'd never learned to use because there had always been someone to do the cooking. Brandon stood there suddenly uncertain about who had really been in control of this conversation. His phone buzzed. Scarlett asking about the divorce timeline, wondering when she could start posting pictures of them together, publicly planning their future with his money. He smiled, reassuring himself. Victoria was a housewife with no resources. The prenuptial agreement he'd insisted on 20 years ago would ensure she got nothing. She'd been a secretary making $25,000 a year when they met. She had no family money, no trust fund, no safety net. She needed him. In the bedroom, Victoria pulled out her secure phone, the one registered to her company, not to Mrs. Brandon Sterling. She sent a single text to David Chen, her assistant at the company Brandon didn't know existed. "It's time to execute Project Renaissance." David's response was immediate. "All assets prepared for revelation. Legal team on standby. Media contacts ready. Your empire awaits your command." Victoria smiled, the first genuine smile she'd had in months. How many women had heard these same words from their millionaire husbands, she thought, as she began packing. How many had been told they were being traded in for a newer model like a car that had depreciated past its useful value? How many had been told they contributed nothing while simultaneously being the invisible foundation holding everything together? She pulled out the designer luggage Brandon had bought her for their 10th anniversary back when he still remembered anniversaries, and began filling it with carefully chosen items. Not the flashy jewelry he'd given her to show off his wealth, but the practical things. Documents, hard drives, the photos of her parents he'd never asked about. Her phone rang. Patricia Morrison's name appeared on the screen. The voice was warm but professional. "Victoria, David told me you're ready to proceed." Victoria confirmed, her voice steady. "He asked for a divorce this morning, admitted to an 8-month affair. On recording, I hope. Everything in our penthouse is recorded. Security system Brandon insisted on. He just never asked who actually controlled the data." Patricia's laugh carried genuine delight. "This is why you're my favorite client. 20 years of preparation for this moment. Most women don't think this far ahead." Victoria replied, folding a simple black dress, the one she'd worn to her father's funeral, the one Brandon said made her look poor. "Most women trust their husbands. I stopped trusting Brandon the day he made me sign that prenup without letting me have a lawyer review it. That's when I knew I needed my own empire." Patricia's tone shifted, carrying news. "Speaking of which, the financial forensics team found something interesting in Sterling Industries' books." Victoria paused in her packing. The revelation came carefully measured. Brandon's been using algorithms to make his trading decisions. Very sophisticated algorithms that seem to predict market movements with uncanny accuracy. The kind of algorithms that would take a genius-level understanding of both markets and coding to create. Victoria's voice was dry. "Imagine that." Patricia continued. "The interesting part is these algorithms match exactly the ones registered to Chen Technologies' intellectual property portfolio. The portfolio you've been building for 20 years. It wasn't a question. He's been stealing from me." The confirmation was swift. For approximately 10 years, generating hundreds of millions in profits he's claimed as his own business acumen. "Victoria, this isn't just divorce. This is corporate theft on a massive scale." Victoria sat on the bed, her hand on her belly as the baby kicked. The room around her held 20 years of a life she'd pretended to live while building something real in the shadows. "Patricia, I want you to document everything, but don't file anything yet. Let Brandon think he's winning for a while." Patricia's voice carried understanding. "The prenup he's so proud of has an infidelity clause. He probably forgot about it." Victoria admitted what she'd known for 2 decades. "Infidelity during pregnancy voids the entire agreement. I wrote it. Brandon was so focused on making sure I couldn't claim his future earnings that he didn't read the fine print about what would void the agreement. His lawyer was fresh out of law school, desperate to please. I may have suggested some language that seemed favorable to Brandon but actually protected me." Patricia's admiration was clear. "Brilliant. When do you want to reveal Chen Technologies?" Victoria looked around the bedroom at the designer clothes Brandon had chosen for her, the jewelry meant to mark her as his property, the life she'd pretended to live. "Soon. But first let him show the world who he really is. Let him parade Scarlett around. Let him trash me in public. Let him think he's won. The higher he builds his house of cards, the more spectacular the collapse." The conference room at Patterson Morrison and Associates smelled of leather and old money, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park. The law firm occupied the entire 40th floor of a building that predated most of Manhattan's skyscrapers, its prestige measured not in modern amenities, but in the photographs of famous clients lining the walls. Senators, celebrities, and more than a few billionaires who needed discreet representation during messy divorces. Brandon sat across from Victoria, his lawyer Marcus Fitzgerald shuffling papers with aggressive efficiency. Marcus was everything Brandon valued in a lawyer: ruthless, expensive, and completely without conscience. His Rolex caught the light as he arranged documents, a subtle display of wealth that Brandon appreciated. His rapid-fire speech interrupted any attempt at pleasantries. "Let's make this quick. My client is a busy man. The prenuptial agreement from 20 years ago is clear. In the event of divorce, Mrs. Sterling receives only what she brought into the marriage." Patricia Morrison, Victoria's lawyer, was everything Marcus wasn't. Warm voice with steel underneath, patience masking strategic brilliance. She adjusted her reading glasses, a simple pair that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary, and picked up the prenuptial agreement. Patricia had been practicing law for 30 years, had handled divorces for 3 Supreme Court justices' wives, and had never lost a case where hidden assets were involved. Brandon added his phone buzzing constantly with texts from Scarlett he didn't even try to hide. Which was nothing. "Victoria was a secretary when we met. I've been more than generous over the years. The clothes, the jewelry, the lifestyle, all provided by me. She's lived like a queen on my success." Victoria sat quietly, hands folded over her belly, observing Brandon's confidence like a scientist studying a specimen. She wore a simple black dress today, nothing flashy, the kind of outfit that whispered rather than shouted. Brandon had always underestimated the power of whispers. His phone rang. He looked at it, then at the room interrupting the proceedings. "I need to take this. It's about the West Coast expansion." He stepped out into the hallway, his voice carrying through the glass doors, words meant to be private but spoken too loudly. "Scarlett, baby, I told you I'm in the lawyer's office. Yes, the divorce will be final soon. Yes, you can start looking at wedding venues." Marcus shifted uncomfortably. Even he seemed to realize his client's lack of discretion wasn't helping their case. When Brandon returned, Patricia had spread several documents across the table, her voice maintaining that perfect balance of professional courtesy and underlying threat. "Mr. Sterling, I've been reviewing this prenuptial agreement, and there's an interesting clause here on page 18. Marcus snatched the document, scanning quickly. His speed-reading ability was legendary in legal circles, part of what made him worth his $2,000 hourly rate. "What clause?" "This is a standard agreement from 20 years ago." Patricia read aloud, her voice calm and clear. "Section 18R32. In the event of infidelity during pregnancy resulting in abandonment of marital duties, the prenuptial agreement becomes void." The room went silent except for the sound of Brandon's phone vibrating against the conference table. Another text from Scarlett. The preview showed a photo of wedding dresses. Brandon interrupted, his face turning red, denial rising. "That's ridiculous. Abandonment? I'm sitting right here. I haven't abandoned anything." Patricia asked mildly. "At your 20th anniversary dinner last night, or during the 12 prenatal appointments you've missed? The 3 ultrasounds you didn't attend? The birthing class you said was unnecessary because that's what doctors are for?" She pulled out a tablet, swiping through documents. "We have documentation of your 8-month affair with Miss Monroe, including credit card receipts. $5,000 at Tiffany & Company last month. $12,000 at Saks Fifth Avenue last week. The private jet to Miami for a weekend when you told your wife you were at a conference in Seattle." Marcus was scrambling through the papers now, his usual composure cracking. "This is circumstantial. We have no proof." Patricia continued, calm and thorough. "We also have hotel records. The Plaza penthouse suite billed to Sterling Industries as client entertainment. Though I'm curious which client required entertainment that included champagne strawberries and a couple's massage." She swiped again on her tablet. "Social media posts where Miss Monroe refers to you as her future husband, dating back to when Mrs. Sterling was only 1 month pregnant. This one is particularly interesting, a photo of Miss Monroe wearing a necklace with the inscription BS Forever. I assume BS stands for Brandon Sterling, not the more obvious interpretation." Brandon's phone rang again. Scarlett calling this time. He declined the call, but Victoria saw the preview of her follow-up text. "Did you get rid of her yet, baby? The wedding planner needs a deposit." His hand slammed on the table, making everyone except Victoria jump. The coffee cups rattled, and Marcus's Mont Blanc pen rolled onto the floor. "She gets nothing. She brought nothing. She contributed nothing. I built my empire while she sat at home spending my money." Victoria spoke for the first time since the meeting began, her voice calm and measured. "We'll see about that, Brandon." The quiet confidence in her voice made Brandon pause. He'd heard that tone before, usually right before a business rival discovered they'd been outmaneuvered. But this was Victoria, his quiet, submissive wife who spent her days at charity lunches and prenatal yoga. The woman who'd needed his permission to buy a new car, who'd asked his opinion on every major purchase, who'd deferred to his judgment on everything from where they lived to what they ate for dinner. His voice carried forced bravado. "What's that supposed to mean?" Patricia pulled out another folder. "It means, Mr. Sterling, that we've done some forensic accounting. Are you aware that your wife inherited a substantial sum when her father died 15 years ago?" Brandon laughed, a harsh sound without humor. "Her father was a nobody, an immigrant who ran a small electronics repair shop." Patricia corrected him, her words precise. "An immigrant with 14 patents in semiconductor technology. Patents that were sold to Intel Corporation for $40 million. Money that Mrs. Sterling invested wisely. The impossibility of it struck him. "That's impossible. I would have known," Victoria asked quietly, each word landing like a stone in still water. When did you ever ask about my family, Brandon? When did you ever care about anything that wasn't directly related to your success?" Marcus was reviewing the new documents, his face growing paler with each page. "Brandon, we need to discuss this privately." Patricia continued building her case. "Furthermore, there's the matter of intellectual property theft. The algorithms Sterling Industries has been using for the past 10 years, the ones that generated approximately $300 million in profits, were developed by Mrs. Sterling and are registered to her company." Brandon's voice cracked. "Her company? Victoria doesn't have a company." Patricia smiled, the expression of a chess player about to say, "Checkmate. Chen Technologies, incorporated 20 years ago the day after your wedding, currently valued at $800 million. The silence that followed was deafening. Marcus's pen, which he'd been nervously clicking, stopped mid-click. Brandon's phone, which had been buzzing constantly, seemed to have gone silent, as if even Scarlett sensed something monumental had shifted. The whisper barely escaped Brandon's lips. "You're lying." Victoria stood slowly, deliberately, her pregnancy making the movement graceful rather than awkward. "Brandon, I've been running a tech empire for 20 years while you thought I was planning dinner parties. Every major success Sterling Industries had was because I manipulated market conditions to favor your moves. Every brilliant insight you had came from conversations I carefully orchestrated. You haven't built an empire. You've been playing with toys in a sandbox I created." She walked to the window, looking out at Central Park, her reflection visible in the glass. "The prenup is void due to your infidelity during my pregnancy. The intellectual property theft is criminal fraud. You've been stealing from me while cheating on me. So the question isn't what I get in this divorce, Brandon. The question is whether I press criminal charges or let you walk away with some dignity intact." Brandon's phone buzzed. Scarlett again. "Brandon, answer me. The wedding planner is waiting." He looked at the phone, then at Victoria, then at the documents spread across the table showing his wife was worth more than 10 times what he was. The words came out small, lacking conviction. "This isn't over." Victoria agreed, turning to face him, backlit by the windows. "No, it's just beginning." 3 days later, in a building Brandon never knew Victoria owned, the real story began to unfold. The 40-floor glass tower on Madison Avenue housed Chen Technologies, though the name on the building was deliberately generic Madison Business Center. Victoria had purchased it 10 years ago through a shell company, paying cash in a deal that had made real estate news but kept her name completely out of it. The building alone was worth $200 million now, Manhattan real estate being what it was. Victoria stepped out of the executive elevator and immediately the atmosphere changed. Gone was the cautious, deferential housewife Brandon knew. Here she was, Victoria Chen, CEO and founder, a woman who commanded respect through brilliance rather than demanding it through bullying. David Chen greeted her using her maiden name with obvious relief. David had been with her for 15 years, recruited straight from MIT, where Victoria had spotted his potential during a guest lecture she'd given under a pseudonym. Good morning, Miss Chen. The Seattle office needs your approval on the expansion merger. Another assistant approached with a tablet. Miss Chen Forbes called again about the interview. They're very persistent about featuring you in their Women in Tech issue. Victoria settled into her ergonomic chair designed for pregnant executives, something she'd had custom made when she realized standard office furniture wasn't designed for pregnant CEOs. Tell Forbes not yet, but soon. 20 years of hiding and Victoria could finally breathe in her own space. Her office, the one Brandon thought was her book club meeting room when she'd mentioned it once, overlooked Central Park. The walls were lined with awards and patents, all under her maiden name or various shell companies. The MIT Excellence in Innovation Award, the Turing Foundation's Distinguished Achievement Medal, recognition from IEEE for breakthrough work in quantum computing applications. She spoke to David while pulling up multiple screens on her desktop setup. Play Brandon's latest voicemail. Brandon's voice filled the room, slightly slurred from drinking more lately. Victoria, I'm being generous offering you the apartment. Don't push me. You know you can't survive without my money. Just take the deal and stop embarrassing yourself. This whole charade about owning a company is pathetic. Nobody believes it. David's face flushed with protective anger. Should I draft a response? Something along the lines of showing him the latest quarterly reports. Victoria pulled up financial reports on her massive monitor. No, let him keep believing what he wants to believe. How's our stock doing? The numbers were strong. Up 12% since last quarter. The AI subsidiary you founded is now valued at $300 million alone. The quantum computing division just landed the Department of Defense contract that's another $500 million over 5 years. Combined with the other holdings, Chen Technologies' total value is $843 million as of this morning's market close. Victoria finished, a small smile playing at her lips. Not bad for a former secretary who contributed nothing. David had been with her long enough to know the full story enough to ask the question that had been bothering him. Why did you hide it so long? Why let him treat you that way, especially these last few years when he became unbearable? Victoria turned to look out at the city, her hand on her belly as the baby kicked strong kicks, like her daughter was already fighting to make her presence known. My father taught me patience. He came to America from Taiwan with nothing, built his electronics repair shop into something more. When the big companies tried to steal his patents, he fought them quietly, strategically. He won because they underestimated him. She pulled up an old photo on her personal screen. Her father in his shop, surrounded by circuit boards and soldering irons, before he died. Before he died, he told me, Victoria, find a man who loves you when you have nothing, because then you'll know it's real. But never actually have nothing. Always have your own power hidden if necessary, but never powerless. Her voice softened. Brandon loved me when I was poor, or at least I thought he did, so I kept my inheritance secret when my father died. $40 million from the patent sales, plus another $20 million in life insurance and investments he'd made. I told Brandon my father left me nothing but debt, and he believed it because it fit his narrative of saving me. She pulled up a complex financial chart showing 20 years of market movements. Look at this. Every major success Sterling Industries had in the last 20 years. See the pattern. 3 months before each breakthrough, Chen Technologies made strategic moves that created the perfect market conditions. When Brandon wanted to expand into West Coast markets, I had already established partnerships there. When he needed capital for acquisitions, mysterious investors appeared with exactly the right amount. David saw the pattern clearly. You were orchestrating his entire career. Victoria corrected him. Not orchestrating, testing. I wanted to see if success would change him, if he would become a true partner once he felt secure. Instead, he became worse. The more successful Sterling Industries became, the more he dismissed my contributions. The more he treated me like an accessory rather than a person. David pulled up another screen. Speaking of Sterling Industries, we have a situation. The forensic accountants found something significant. Victoria leaned forward, reading the data. The numbers were worse than she'd expected. He used my investment accounts to fund his personal projects. $2 million over the last 3 years, all transferred without authorization. David's voice carried an edge. But that's not the worst part. He pulled up code comparisons. The algorithm Sterling Industries has been using your algorithms. He's been selling them to competitors as his own work. We're talking about intellectual property theft worth hundreds of millions. Victoria sat back, her expression thoughtful. This changes everything. Brandon hasn't just cheated on me emotionally and physically. He's stolen from me while doing it and then sold what he'd stolen. Her voice was firm. Patricia needs to see this immediately. But David, I want you to start something else. Begin the process of revealing Chen Technologies' true ownership. Gradually. Start with the tech blogs. Let them pick up the scent. I want the revelation to seem organic, not orchestrated. David nodded, understanding. That will cause a media storm when they realize you're worth $800 million, while Brandon's only worth $50 million. Victoria's response carried weight. Then maybe other women in my position will realize they have options. Financial independence after 50 isn't just a dream. It's very possible if you plan for it. David hesitated, then shared additional news. There's something else. We intercepted communications between Scarlett Monroe and someone named Marcus. Not Brandon's lawyer, a different Marcus. She's not who she seems to be. Victoria raised an eyebrow. The revelation came carefully. Her real name is Sandra Hayes. She's done this before. Targeted wealthy married men, convinced them to leave their wives, then took them for everything. She's got a boyfriend who helps run the con. They've been planning this for over a year, specifically targeted Brandon at that conference in Las Vegas, the one where he said he made the connection that led to the West Coast expansion. Victoria laughed, but there was no humor in it. Of course she did. She played him from the beginning. David asked the obvious question. Should we warn him? Victoria considered this, then shook her head. He wouldn't believe us. He'd think it was jealousy or spite. Besides, he deserves to learn this lesson the hard way. Send everything to Patricia, though. It might be useful in court. Her phone buzzed. A text from Margaret Wilson, one of her few real friends who knew the truth about her situation. Saw Brandon at the club with that child. She was wearing your grandmother's necklace, the one he said was lost. Victoria's jaw tightened. Her grandmother's necklace. A simple jade pendant that had been in her family for generations. She'd thought she'd misplaced it, had blamed herself for being careless. But Brandon had taken it and given it to his mistress. Her voice took on an edge David rarely heard. David, accelerate the timeline. I want the board of Sterling Industries to know who really owns the majority shares by end of week. David's surprise was evident. You own shares in Sterling Industries. Victoria smiled, and it was the smile of a predator who'd been pretending to be prey for far too long. 60%, acquired through various shell companies over the years. Every time Brandon needed emergency capital, I was there with a mysterious investor. He was so grateful, so relieved. He never questioned where the money came from or why the terms were so favorable. She stood moving to the window wall that looked out over Manhattan. Somewhere out there, Brandon was probably having lunch with Scarlett, planning their future with money he thought was his, never realizing he'd been living in a house of cards Victoria had built and could demolish with a whisper, "It's time for my transformation to become public. 20 years of hiding is enough. Let's show the world what a dismissed housewife can accomplish when she's underestimated." Brandon stood at the podium in Sterling Industries' press room, his silver hair perfectly styled by the professional who'd spent an hour making him look approachable, yet successful. The lighting had been adjusted 3 times to minimize the bags under his eyes from sleepless nights spent fighting with lawyers. His media trainer's exact words echoed in his head as he arranged his expression into something appropriately somber with undertones of hope. His voice carried the practiced gravitas he'd perfected over decades of quarterly earnings calls. Thank you all for coming. I want to address the rumors about my personal life with transparency and honesty. The teleprompter held his prepared remarks, but Brandon prided himself on speaking from the heart, or at least appearing to. After 20 years of marriage, Victoria and I have grown in different directions. While I've been building Sterling Industries into the powerhouse it is today, she's been unable to adapt to the demands of being a CEO's wife. The camera flashes punctuated his pauses. He could see reporters scribbling notes, their expressions neutral but engaged. The stress of my position, the late nights, the constant travel, the pressure of managing a $50 million company, it takes a toll on a marriage. Victoria is a good woman, but she comes from a simple background. She never quite understood the sacrifices necessary for success at this level. Jennifer Chen from the Wall Street Journal raised her hand, her voice cutting through his rehearsed narrative. "Mr. Sterling, what about the fact that your wife is 7 months pregnant?" Brandon's jaw tightened, a tell Victoria would have recognized from 20 years of marriage. He was angry, but trying not to show it. "Victoria will be well provided for within the bounds of our prenuptial agreement. I'm not the villain here. My wife contributed nothing to my success. She's been living off my hard work for 20 years, and I've been more than generous." Another reporter, this one from TechCrunch. "Is it true you're already engaged to Miss Monroe?" Brandon's face transformed into what he thought was a humble smile. "I'm fortunate to have found a true partner in Scarlett Monroe, someone who understands ambition, drive, and the sacrifices necessary for success." Scarlett stepped out from the wings and the cameras went wild. She wore a red bandage dress that hugged every curve, designer heels that brought her height nearly to Brandon's, and on her hand a massive diamond ring that caught the light like a small sun. Her giggle was practiced high and sweet. "Brandon proposed last night. We're planning a spring wedding, something intimate, just close friends and family." By intimate, she meant a $1 million affair in the Hamptons with 300 guests. Jennifer Chen's follow-up came quickly. "Miss Monroe, how do you feel about Mr. Sterling's pregnant wife?" Scarlett's false sympathy was transparent to anyone paying attention. "I feel for her truly. It must be so hard facing your 50s with nothing to show for it but a failed marriage. But Brandon deserves someone who can keep up with him." In Victoria's office at Chen Technologies, David showed her his tablet. The comments were already pouring in, and the tide was not turning the way Brandon expected. Within 30 minutes of the press conference going live, #PoorVictoria was trending nationally. Old photos had surfaced Victoria and Brandon in their tiny Queens apartment 20 years ago, both grinning at the camera like they'd won the lottery just by finding each other. The comments were brutal in their sympathy for Victoria and their contempt for Brandon. David scrolled through them. "Trading her in for a younger model, classic midlife crisis. She looked so happy in these old photos. He threw away everything real for plastic. He's disgusting." Victoria watched the press conference replay with clinical detachment. "Let him have his moment. The internet is destroying him and he doesn't even know it yet." Her prediction proved accurate. By evening, the backlash had grown into a firestorm. Morning talk shows were already lining up segments about middle-aged men abandoning pregnant wives. Women's magazines were preparing features on spousal abandonment. The court of public opinion had rendered its verdict and Brandon Sterling was guilty. But Victoria had bigger plans than letting social media handle her revenge. She picked up her phone. "James, it's time." James Fitzgerald had been watching Scarlett Monroe for 2 weeks, and what he'd uncovered made his years as an NYPD detective seem tame by comparison. The private investigator sat in Patricia Morrison's office, now spreading surveillance photos and documents across her conference table like evidence at a trial. His background showed in everything he did, the methodical way he arranged the evidence, the practiced neutrality of his voice, the careful documentation of every detail. At 54, James had spent a decade in private investigation after 20 years on the force, and he'd seen enough human ugliness to recognize a professional con artist when he tracked one. Patricia leaned forward, reading the dossier. "Sandra Hayes, not Scarlett Monroe." James nodded, pulling out more files. "Born in Dayton, Ohio. Real name Sandra Marie Hayes. She's run this con 4 times before, and those are just the ones I could verify." He laid out the timeline with detective precision. Victim 1, Chicago, 2018. Dr. Richard Patterson, pharmaceutical executive. She met him at a charity gala, 18-month relationship. Took him for $4.2 million through joint accounts and real estate fraud. He settled privately, too embarrassed to press charges. The next file, Victim 2, Miami, 2019 to 2020. Marcus Webb, real estate developer. She posed as an interior designer, became his fiancée. $6 million in property transfers and company shares. Webb's company went bankrupt. The man attempted suicide during the civil proceedings, then dropped all charges. Patricia's expression darkened as James continued. Victim 3, Austin 2021, Senator James Morrison of Texas. She volunteered for his re-election campaign, started an affair, $3 million in hush money and diverted campaign funds. He paid her off to go away quietly. Still in therapy, according to my sources. The fourth file was the most recent, Victim 4, San Francisco 2022 to 2023. David Liu, tech startup founder. She approached him at a conference posing as a potential investor. $2.8 million plus she stole proprietary technology. He's still in litigation. Patricia did the math quickly. $16 million across 4 victims. And now she's set her sights on Brandon. James pulled out his surveillance recordings. She's been planning this for over a year. Studied him, knew about the company's vulnerabilities, understood his insecurities about aging. She met him at that Las Vegas conference deliberately. The West Coast expansion he's so proud of, she orchestrated the introduction to those investors. He pressed play on the first recording captured 3 days ago at a luxury spa in Midtown. "Baby, you should see this idiot. Brandon's easier to manipulate than we thought. He actually believes I'm in love with him." Scarlett's voice on the recording was nothing like the sweet, breathy tone she used with Brandon. This was harsh, calculating, stripped of pretense. "The divorce settlement is the problem. That pathetic wife might get something because of the prenup situation. Every dollar she gets is less for us. Though honestly, she's so plain and boring, no wonder he upgraded to me." The second recording came from a phone call to her real boyfriend, Marcus Hayes. Not Marcus Fitzgerald, the lawyer, but Marcus Hayes, career criminal with warrants in 3 states. "The fool already agreed to no prenup with me. Can you believe it? Makes his wife sign one but thinks I'm different because I'm young and pretty and tell him he's amazing in bed." Scarlett's laugh was cruel. "My lawyer says 18 months minimum to make it look legitimate before I can divorce him and take half. But I'm thinking we don't wait that long. I'm maxing out the credit cards next week, converting everything to cash and jewelry we can move." Marcus's voice came through tinny but clear. "How much can you get?" Her response was immediate. "If I move fast, maybe $500,000 before the cards get shut down. Then we're on a plane to Nassau. Let this whole thing blow over and find the next mark." James fast-forwarded to the crucial part. "She already has the exit planned. Fake passports, offshore accounts, the whole setup. She's done this enough times to have a system." Patricia's question was direct. "Does Brandon know any of this?" James shook his head. "He's in complete denial. Thinks she loves him. When I tried to suggest she might not be what she seems, he accused me of being jealous on Victoria's behalf." Patricia made her decision. Send everything to Victoria. Let her decide whether to warn him. Victoria listened to the recordings in her office, David beside her with a tablet tracking Scarlett's movements in real time. The audio played through speakers, filling the room with evidence of the con that had ensnared her soon-to-be ex-husband. When the recordings finished, Victoria sat in silence for a long moment. David watched her, waiting for the anger, the satisfaction, the vindication. Instead, her face showed something more complex, a mixture of pity for Brandon's foolishness and calculation about how to use this information most effectively. Her voice was quiet. "Should we warn him?" David's response came quickly. "She maxed out $455,000 on his cards yesterday. He's already getting the decline notifications." Victoria stood walking to the windows that overlooked the city where her husband was currently being played by a professional. "Let them run. Send all evidence to Patricia and the FBI. Federal wire fraud charges. Let them think they got away with it." Her strategic mind was already working through the implications. Brandon needs to see who she really is. This is his last lesson in the consequences of underestimating people. He thought I was worthless because I wasn't flashy. He thought Scarlett was valuable because she was pretty and young and told him what he wanted to hear. Let him learn the difference between substance and performance. David hesitated. "The FBI will arrest her at the airport." Victoria's smile was cold. "Perfect. Public humiliation. Cameras. The perp walk. Let the world see what happens when you choose glitter over gold." The charity luncheon at the Carlisle Hotel drew Manhattan's elite like moths to flame. 200 of the city's wealthiest women gathering in the grand ballroom under chandeliers that cost more than most people's houses. Victoria arrived 8 months pregnant, now moving with the careful grace of someone who knew every eye in the room would be on her. Margaret Wilson had saved her a seat at a table that read like a who's who of female power in New York. Judge Patricia Hendricks, who'd been assigned Victoria's divorce case. Dr. Sarah Kim, MIT provost and tech sector expert. Catherine Liu, president of the New York chapter of the ACLU. Jennifer Park, hedge fund manager with $2 billion under management. Women who'd built their own empires and recognized another empire builder when they saw one. The whispers started the moment Victoria entered. Everyone had read the TechCrunch article that morning, the one speculating about the mysterious founder of Chen Technologies. Everyone had seen Brandon's press conference, watched him parade Scarlett around while dismissing his pregnant wife as worthless. The room crackled with anticipation, sensing a confrontation coming. Brandon provided it by arriving drunk. It was barely noon, but his face was flushed, his walk just slightly unsteady, his voice too loud when he spotted Victoria's table. Scarlett clung to his arm, her confidence shaken by the internet backlash but trying to maintain her facade. His words carried across the suddenly quiet ballroom. "Ladies, Victoria, you're looking tired. The stress of divorce proceedings, I suppose, fighting a battle you can't win." Scarlett's giggle was forced, brittle. All alone trying to manage without him. It must be so hard, facing your 50s with nothing to show for it but a failed marriage. Margaret snorted into her champagne, the sound carrying, "Yes, Victoria's really struggling. Just yesterday she was deciding whether to buy that biotech startup for $40 million or wait until the price dropped to $35 million. Brandon's denial was aggressive, emboldened by alcohol. "What startup? You don't have $40 million. This is all a publicity stunt. Fake news designed to make me look bad." Victoria finally looked up from her phone where she'd been approving a $70 million acquisition. Her voice was calm, almost conversational. "You're right, Brandon. I don't have $40 million. She let the pause extend, watching hope bloom on his face before crushing it. "I have $843 million, give or take a few million depending on this morning's market fluctuations. But who's counting?" The ballroom went dead silent. 200 women stopped mid-conversation, mid-sip, mid-breath. Even the waiters froze. Victoria stood, and pregnancy made the movement dramatic rather than awkward. She pulled out her tablet, swiping through slides with the casual confidence of someone used to presenting to boards. "Since we're discussing my assets publicly, let's be thorough." Her voice carried across the room without needing a microphone. "Chen Technologies' $843 million valuation. AI Medical Diagnostics Division, $300 million. Quantum Computing Division, $300 million, with Department of Defense contracts worth $500 million over the next 5 years. Biotech applications, $200 million. Core intellectual property and infrastructure, $43 million. She swiped to the next slide. Sterling Industries ownership through shell companies, 60%. Market value of my shares, $187 million. Another swipe. Real estate holdings. Manhattan penthouse, $15 million in my name only. The Madison Business Center, where Chen Technologies is headquartered, $200 million. This hotel, yes, I own the Carlisle, $80 million. The final number landed like a hammer. Total net worth as of this morning, $1.375 billion. The silence that followed was absolute. Phones appeared throughout the room, not to call anyone but to verify what they'd just heard, to pull up business records to confirm the impossible truth that the dismissed housewife was worth more than most of them combined. Brandon's shout broke the silence. "This is fraud. You hid assets. That's illegal in a marriage." Judge Hendricks turned around from the next table, her voice carrying judicial authority. "Actually, Mr. Sterling, maintaining separate assets acquired through inheritance or prior business ventures is perfectly legal. What's illegal is stealing intellectual property and selling it as your own work." She looked directly at him, and her gaze was the same one she used in her courtroom when defendants lied under oath. "That's corporate espionage, The FBI has opened an investigation into your algorithm licensing deals. I believe they're very interested in how Sterling Industries' proprietary code matches Chen Technologies' patents filed 3 years earlier. Scarlett pulled on Brandon's arm too hard, her desperation showing. "Let's go, baby. These bitter old women are just jealous." Victoria's voice was calm, devastating in its certainty. "Scarlett, or should I say Sandra Hayes from Dayton, Ohio." The color drained from Scarlett's face. Victoria continued producing a folder that James Fitzgerald had prepared. Sandra Hayes, born March 15, 2001. Previous victims: Dr. Richard Patterson, Chicago, $4.2 million. Marcus Webb, Miami, $6 million. Senator James Morrison, Austin, $3 million. David Liu, San Francisco, $2.8 million. Total stolen across 4 cons, $16 million. She opened the folder showing photographs, bank records, police reports. "Oh, and how's Marcus? Your real boyfriend, the one you're meeting tonight at the Newark Motel?" Scarlett's mask cracked. "I don't know what you're talking about. That's all lies." Victoria pulled out her phone, her finger hovering over the play button. "Would you like to hear the recordings? The ones from the spa where you called Brandon an idiot? Or the ones where you and Marcus planned to max out his credit cards and flee to the Bahamas?" She pressed play. Scarlett's voice filled the ballroom through the phone's speaker, harsh and mocking. "Baby, you should see this idiot. Brandon's easier to manipulate than we thought. He actually believes I'm in love with him." Gasps rippled through the room. Phones that had been pulled out to verify Victoria's wealth were now recording this new revelation, capturing evidence that would be viral within minutes. The recording continued, Scarlett's voice dripping with contempt. "The divorce settlement is the problem. That pathetic wife might get something. Every dollar she gets is less for us. Though honestly, she's so plain and boring, no wonder he upgraded to me." Victoria played more of the damning evidence of the con. "My lawyer says 18 months minimum before I can divorce him and take half. The fool already agreed to no prenup with me. Can you believe it? Then today's surveillance, $455,000 on the cards, converting everything to cash and jewelry we can move. United Airlines to Nassau tomorrow night. Total take about $510,000. Not bad for 8 months' work." The final line hit hardest, Scarlett's laugh cruel and clear. "God, men are so easy when you tell them they're special." The ballroom erupted. Not in noise, but in frantic typing, texting, tweeting. This wasn't just gossip anymore. This was news. National news. The hashtag Scarlett Exposed was trending before the recording even finished. Scarlett's pretense shattered completely. Her sweet voice vanished, replaced by something vicious and raw. "You stupid old man." She turned on Brandon, her finger jabbing his chest hard enough to make him stumble back. "You think you're special? You're just another midlife crisis with a bank account. At least your wife was smart enough to hide her money. You practically threw yours at me." She grabbed her handbag, a Coach bag she'd charged to Brandon's account that morning, and her voice rose to a shriek. "Enjoy being poor loser." Her heels clicked on the marble floor like gunshots as she stormed out. Every phone in the room tracked her exit, recording the moment for posterity, for social media, for the inevitable news coverage. Brandon stood alone in the center of the ballroom. 200 of Manhattan's elite stared at him. Every phone was either recording or uploading. His world was crumbling in real time, broadcast to the internet, preserved forever in the digital record of his humiliation. He approached Victoria, swaying slightly, his voice breaking. "Victoria, please." Her response was firm, but not cruel. "Don't. You made your choices, Brandon. Now live with them." She walked past him, head high, hand protectively on her belly. Margaret's comment to the women at the neighboring table was loud enough for the room to hear. "Now that's how you handle a narcissist ex-husband, with class." The Sterling Industries boardroom had never held this much tension. Emergency sessions had been called before during the 2008 financial crisis, during the SEC investigation of 2015, during the hostile takeover attempt of 2019. But this was different. This time the threat came from inside, from the very foundation of the company itself. Robert Blackstone sat at the head of the table, his face carved from stone. 68 years old, Princeton-educated old money that predated the American Revolution, he'd been chairman of Sterling Industries' board for 30 years. He'd watched Brandon build the company, enabled his arrogance, rubber-stamped his decisions. Now he was about to preside over Brandon's removal. Martha Rodriguez, the CFO, had her laptop open screen displaying ownership structures that she'd spent the last 48 hours untangling. The shell companies, the Delaware LLCs, the Nevada corporations, the Wyoming trusts, all roads led back to Chen Technologies, and all of Chen Technologies belonged to Victoria. The 3 women board members Brandon had spent years dismissing sat with barely concealed satisfaction. Dr. Sarah Kim, tech sector expert, who'd warned about the algorithm patents. Jennifer Park, operations specialist, who'd questioned the mysterious investors. Catherine Liu, legal counsel, who'd flagged potential IP issues. All of them had been right, and all of them had been ignored. 8 men who'd been Brandon's golf buddies, his yes men, his enablers, looked nervous. They'd profited from their association with Brandon, gained board seats through friendship rather than merit, voted however he told them to vote. Now they were reading the room, calculating which way the wind was blowing, preparing to abandon ship. Brandon arrived wearing a Brioni suit that cost $6,000, but hung wrong on his frame. He'd lost weight from stress, and the expensive tailoring couldn't hide the toll the last 2 weeks had taken. His hands trembled slightly as he poured coffee, though he tried to hide it by keeping them busy. His voice carried forced confidence. "Gentlemen, let's address this public relations situation and move forward. The media has blown everything out of proportion. My personal life is separate from company business." Robert's interruption was colder than Brandon had ever heard. "Mr. Sterling, sit down." The use of his surname rather than his first name was the first sign. The second was Robert's tone, not collegial, not friendly, not even neutral. This was the voice of a judge about to pass sentence. Robert continued, "We're not here about your divorce. We're here about the majority shareholders' request." Brandon's laugh was forced, already defensive. "Majority shareholder, I own 40%. The rest is divided among 15 different investors. There is no majority shareholder." Robert slid a document across the polished mahogany. "Was divided. Until this morning when we received notification that several shell companies are all owned by the same entity." The conference phone in the center of the table crackled to life. The voice that emerged was one Brandon knew intimately, had heard every morning for 20 years, but never like this. Never with this authority, this confidence, this undeniable power. Victoria's greeting was formal, establishing distance. "Good afternoon, everyone." Brandon's whisper was barely audible. "Victoria." Her correction was swift, redefining their relationship. "Ms. Chen, actually. I've owned 60% of Sterling Industries for the past 5 years. Bought it up quietly whenever you needed emergency capital, Brandon. You were so grateful for those mysterious angel investors. Remember." Martha turned her laptop screen so the room could see. The ownership structure was laid out in perfect clarity. Every shell company, every investment vehicle, every holding entity, all traced back to Chen Technologies. All controlled by Victoria Chen. Delaware LLCs, Sterling Capital Partners 15%. Madison Investment Group 12%. Pacific Rim Ventures 8%. All Chen Technologies subsidiaries. Nevada corporations, Sterling Growth Fund 10%. Technology Advancement Corp 7%. All Chen Technologies subsidiaries. Wyoming Trusts Future Industries Limited 5%. Global Tech Holdings 3%. All Chen Technologies subsidiaries. The total was undeniable 60% controlling interest. Brandon stood the chair, scraping back with a harsh sound. "This is illegal insider trading, market manipulation. This is fraud." Robert's response was measured, each word chosen for maximum impact. "Everything was done through proper SEC channels with full compliance. She has excellent lawyers, Mr. Sterling, much better than yours." The emphasis on much was deliberate. Martha pulled up another screen, this one showing code comparisons. The evidence of intellectual property theft was irrefutable. Victoria's voice came through the speaker again. "Since we're discussing legality, Let's talk about the intellectual property you've been selling, Brandon. The screen split. On the left, Chen Technologies algorithms with USPTO registration from March 2014. On the right, Sterling Industries claimed development from June 2014. The match percentage 97.3%. Victoria's words were precise, damning, "That's corporate theft. You've been using my code for 10 years, generating $287 million in profits you claimed as your own genius." The next screen showed licensing agreements. Worse, you've been selling licenses to competitors. Goldman Sachs $15 million, Morgan Stanley $12 million, Deutsche Bank $18 million, JP Morgan $10 million, Citigroup $8 million. Total $63 million in licensing revenue for intellectual property you stole from me. Her voice carried the weight of undeniable truth. The FBI is very interested in this, Brandon, as is the SEC, as is the Department of Justice. Robert's announcement was formal, procedural. Given these revelations, Ms. Chen has called for a vote of no confidence in the current CEO. Brandon's desperation showed in his volume, "You can't do this. I built this company from nothing, with my bare hands." Victoria's response came through the speaker, calm as ice. "With whose initial investment?" Brandon checked the incorporation documents. Page 47, subsection 3A. "That mysterious $100,000 in seed money you told everyone came from your business acumen. It came from my father's life insurance. I gave it to you as a wedding gift. You said we didn't need papers between us because we were in love." The pause carried weight. "I was young. I believed you." Robert called for the vote. All in favor of removing Brandon Sterling as CEO. Every hand went up except Brandon's. The vote was 11-0, Brandon's abstention not counting. The motion carried. Security guards entered as if they'd been waiting for this moment because they had. Brandon's assistant had been notified an hour ago to pack his personal effects. Their announcement was professional, rehearsed. "Mr. Sterling, you have 1 hour to clear your office. Personal items only. All computers, files, and company property remain here." Brandon's plea was desperate, reaching for any anchor in the storm. "Victoria, please. You're carrying my child. Our child. We're a family." Her interruption was swift, cutting through his manipulation. "Our child will grow up knowing her mother built an empire while her father tried to steal it. She'll learn about financial independence after 50. About transformation that begins when you're discarded, not ends with it. About not letting anyone diminish who you are." The longer pause was deliberate. "And Brandon, this isn't over. The FBI is investigating. The SEC wants answers. Your theft generated hundreds of millions in illegal profits. I could destroy you completely. Criminal charges, prison time, total ruin." The final pause carried the weight of mercy. "But I won't. Because unlike you, I'm capable of restraint. You're fired. You're broke. You're publicly humiliated. That's punishment enough. What you do with this lesson is up to you." The security guards escorted him out. His phone buzzed constantly. Reporters, former friends, Scarlett calling from some cheap motel, everyone wanting a piece of the story, nobody wanting to help. At JFK Airport's International Terminal, Scarlett Monroe moved through the crowd with practiced ease. She'd changed her appearance, blonde wig instead of her usual style oversized sunglasses, despite being indoors designer tracksuit that screamed money while trying to look casual. 3 large suitcases rolled behind her, and the Heiress carry-on she clutched contained $500,000 in jewelry and cash. The United Airlines first-class check-in counter was quiet at this hour. The agent took her passport. Sandra Cooper, one of 3 fake identities she'd cultivated over the years. Business or pleasure, Ms. Cooper. Scarlett's smile was too bright, too practiced. Pleasure. Just a vacation in Nassau. The agent's trained eye noticed details. One-way ticket, $12,000 paid in cash, no return flight booked, traveling alone with excessive luggage. But she processed the ticket anyway. Not her job to question wealthy customers, even suspicious ones. The boarding pass printed first-class seat 2A departure in 90 minutes. At a different terminal, Marcus Hayes checked in for a Delta flight to Cancun. His fake passport identified him as Michael Heiress, businessman. 2 suitcases contained men's Rolex watches and designer goods from Scarlett's shopping spree, ready to be fenced in Mexico for cash. The plan was simple. Fly separately to avoid suspicion. Meet in the Bahamas in 3 days. Disappear for 6 months while the heat died down. Find the next mark. They'd done this 4 times before. The system worked. Scarlett reached the gate, settling into a seat near the window where she could watch the plane. Boarding would begin in 30 minutes. She pulled out her phone to text Marcus, then thought better of it. No electronic trail. They'd rehearsed this enough times. The announcement came through the terminal speakers. Passengers for United Flight 1247 to Nassau will begin boarding shortly. First-class passengers may board when ready. Scarlett stood, grabbing her carry-on. The Heiress bag felt heavy with cash and jewelry. $510,000 total. Not the biggest score they'd ever made, but respectable for 8 months of work. And Brandon had been so easy, so desperate to feel young and desired, so willing to believe someone like her could actually love someone like him. She approached the gate. The agent scanned her boarding pass. The system beeped. Then FBI agent Maria Rodriguez stepped forward, badge held high. "Sandra Hayes, FBI, you're under arrest." 2 more agents appeared, cutting off any escape route. Scarlett's training kicked in, her voice shifting to innocent confusion. "I think you have the wrong person. My name is Sandra Cooper." Agent Rodriguez's interruption was professional practiced. "We have warrants for you under 3 names. Sandra Hayes, your legal name. Scarlett Monroe, the alias you used with Brandon Sterling. Sandra Cooper, the identity on this fraudulent passport." The handcuffs clicked into place. Agent Rodriguez began reading Miranda rights while Scarlett's mind raced through options. Lawyer. She needed her lawyer, the one who'd gotten her out of trouble in Miami. The charges came in a litany. You're being charged with wire fraud across state lines, identity theft, conspiracy to commit fraud, interstate transportation of stolen property, passport fraud. Additional charges pending from previous victims who are now cooperating with our investigation. The terminal had gone quiet. Phones appeared everywhere, travelers filming, uploading, sharing. TMZ would have the footage within minutes. James Fitzgerald had made sure of that, tipping off both the FBI and the media to the exact timing and location. The perp walk was deliberately public. Agent Rodriguez walked Scarlett through the busiest part of the terminal, past families and business people and college students, all filming the spectacle. Scarlett, in her designer tracksuit and $3,000 sunglasses, hands cuffed behind her back, being led to federal custody. At the Cancun gate, Mexican federal police arrested Marcus Hayes simultaneously. The FBI had coordinated with international law enforcement, ensuring both conspirators were taken at the same time. His charges mirrored hers, with additional counts for money laundering and possession of stolen goods. The flights to Nassau and Cancun departed without them. Within an hour, the video was everywhere. Side-by-side images flooded social media. On the left, Scarlett at Brandon's press conference, smug and confident, flashing her engagement ring. On the right, Scarlett in handcuffs, mascara running, being led through JFK in designer clothes that suddenly looked like costume jewelry. The comments were merciless. "Karma is beautiful. That's what you get for mocking a pregnant woman. Play stupid games, win stupid prizes." From private jets to perp walks, a love story. Brandon watched it all from a Holiday Inn in Newark. His penthouse was in Victoria's name. He'd discovered that detail yesterday when he tried to return and found the locks changed. His bank accounts were frozen pending investigation. The credit cards Scarlett had maxed out were canceled. His Mercedes had been repossessed because the lease was through Sterling Industries, and he no longer worked there. He had $847 in his wallet. That was it. That was all that remained of Brandon Sterling, millionaire CEO, self-made success story, master of the universe. The hotel room was $89 a night. The furniture was bolted to the floor. The window overlooked a parking lot where his rental car sat, a Honda Civic, the cheapest option at the airport. He'd taken an Uber to the airport, realized he couldn't afford anything better than economy, and even that was stretching his resources. His phone lay on the bed beside him, a constant source of pain. 247 missed calls, 1,849 text messages, 3,000 unread emails. Every one of them either a reporter seeking comment, a former friend distancing themselves, or a creditor demanding payment. The voicemails to Victoria started at 10 p.m. after he'd been drinking from the minibar until he remembered he couldn't afford the minibar charges. The first one was angry, defensive, lashing out because that was easier than accepting responsibility. His voice was slurred, loud. "You vindictive witch! 20 years of marriage and this is how you repay me. I gave you everything. That penthouse, the lifestyle, the status. You were nothing when I met you. A secretary making $25,000 a year. And this is the thanks I get." He could hear himself breathing heavily, the rage making it hard to form words. "You've ruined me. Destroyed me. The FBI is investigating me. My company is gone. My reputation is gone. All because you couldn't handle the fact that I moved on." Something crashed in the background of the recording, him throwing a glass at the wall. The message cut off abruptly when he realized he was losing control. The second voicemail, 45 minutes later, tried a different approach. Bargaining. Negotiation. The voice of a man who'd spent his career making deals and thought this was just another transaction. The tone was calculated, trying for reasonable. "Victoria, listen. We can work this out. Think about our history. 20 years together. That has to mean something. Right, I made mistakes. I see that now. The affair was, I was going through something. Midlife crisis, the pressure of running the company. You understand." The plea became more desperate. "But we can fix this. For Elizabeth. Think about our daughter. She needs her father. She needs a family. Drop the charges. Call off the FBI. We'll split assets fairly. I'll sign whatever you want. Just please. I'm at a Holiday Inn, Victoria. A Holiday Inn." His voice cracked on those last words, the reality of his situation finally penetrating the denial. The third voicemail came after midnight. The hotel bar had closed, but he'd convinced the night clerk to sell him a bottle of wine from the vending machine. The voice was thick, slurred, defeated. The words came slowly, fighting through alcohol and exhaustion. "Victoria, I have nothing. Nothing. Do you understand the FBI is investigating me? My lawyers abandoned me. Can't afford them anymore. My mother won't take my calls." He was crying now, not trying to hide it. "Scarlett was arrested. Did you know, at the airport? It's all over the news. She was running. With Marcus, her real boyfriend. They used me. They played me for a fool." The bitter laugh that followed was self-directed. "You tried to warn me, didn't you? At the luncheon, you knew. Of course you knew. You know everything. You always did. I just never paid attention." The pause stretched long enough that the voicemail system almost cut him off. "I'm 58 years old. I have $847 in my pocket. I'm staying at a Holiday Inn in Newark. I can't afford a lawyer. Can't get a job. Everyone knows my face. How did this happen? How did I become this person?" The fourth voicemail was the shortest. 3 a.m., sitting on the floor of the bathroom, completely sober now in that terrible way that comes after drinking too much. The clarity was worse than the alcohol. Just 2 words at first, "I'm sorry." The pause that followed carried the weight of 20 years. "I'm so sorry, Victoria, for everything. You were right about all of it. You did contribute everything. You built Sterling Industries. You saved it 7 times. You wrote the code. You orchestrated every success I ever claimed." His voice broke completely. "And I took credit. I told the world you contributed nothing. I paraded Scarlett in front of you while you were pregnant with our daughter. I called you worthless. You, the woman who's worth $1 billion. The woman who built an empire while I played pretend CEO." The crying was audible now, raw and unfiltered. "I see it now. Everything you did, everything you sacrificed. 20 years of making yourself smaller so I could feel bigger. And I never noticed, never appreciated it. Just took and took and took until there was nothing left to take." The final words came quietly. "I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I just wanted you to know. I'm sorry. I'm so very sorry." The message ended. Victoria listened to all 4 voicemails in her penthouse, Patricia sitting beside her on the sofa. Elizabeth kicked strongly in her belly, responding to her mother's elevated heart rate. Patricia's question was gentle. Should I call him back on your behalf? Victoria's hand rested on her stomach, feeling her daughter move. What would I say? The lawyer's response was measured. That depends. What do you want from this? Victoria considered the question honestly. Part of me wants to help him. 20 years is a long time. We built a life together, even if it was built on a lie. He's the father of my child. Patricia waited, knowing there was more. Victoria's voice strengthened. But the other part knows that helping him now would rob him of the only chance he has to actually learn and change. He needs to hit bottom, really hit it. Then maybe he can become the father Elizabeth deserves. The man he could have been if he hadn't been so busy pretending to be someone he wasn't. She stood walking to the windows that overlooked Manhattan. Somewhere out there, Brandon was learning what it meant to have nothing. Learning what she'd always known, that worth wasn't measured in dollars or titles or corner offices. Her decision was final. Let him sit with this. Let him feel it. If he's going to change, it has to come from inside, not from me rescuing him again. The courthouse steps were crowded with reporters when Victoria emerged 8.5 months pregnant, now moving with the slow dignity of someone who'd just dismantled her husband's life with legal precision. Judge Patricia Hendricks had presided over the hearing with the efficiency of someone who'd seen 1,000 divorces and recognized genuine injustice when it sat in her courtroom. Patricia Morrison walked beside Victoria, briefcase in hand, satisfaction evident in every measured step. The settlement had been exactly what Victoria requested, and Brandon's public defender, a young man overwhelmed by the media attention and his client's spectacular fall, had advised immediate acceptance. The terms were brutal in their simplicity. Full custody of Elizabeth to Victoria with supervised visitation for Brandon, contingent on proof of stable employment and completed therapy. No alimony requested, no child support demanded. All marital assets transferred to Victoria, though she'd owned them through various entities anyway. Brandon kept only his personal possessions, clothes, photographs, the detritus of a life that no longer existed. The final clause had surprised even Patricia. Any settlement money Brandon might have claimed Victoria donated to the Manhattan Women's Shelter. $10 million for a new program supporting women over 50 escaping narcissistic marriages. The Phoenix Fund, she called it. For women rising from ashes. One reporter broke through the security line, microphone extended. Jennifer Chen from the Wall Street Journal, the one Victoria had been feeding stories to for months. Ms. Chen, how does it feel to win? Victoria paused, considering the question with genuine thought rather than political deflection. Her hand rested on her belly, feeling Elizabeth's strong kicks. This isn't about winning. It's about showing that transformation doesn't have to end with being discarded. Sometimes it begins there. Jennifer's follow-up was quick. What's next for you? The answer came easily. Chen Technologies goes public next month. Initial valuation is $1.2 billion. We're also launching an initiative to help women over 50 start their own businesses. She touched her belly again. And personally, I'm about to become a mother. Everything else is secondary to that. The final question carried weight. Any words for your ex-husband? Victoria looked toward the side entrance where Brandon would exit, avoiding the main press gauntlet. Their eyes would meet, soon she knew. One last acknowledgement of what they'd been to each other before moving into separate futures. I hope Brandon learns that success built on someone else's foundation isn't real success, and I hope he becomes a better father than he was a husband. Her town car pulled up. As she settled into the back seat, she saw him emerge through the side door. Rumpled suit, shoulders hunched, walking alone. For a moment their gazes connected across the courthouse plaza. She nodded once, acknowledgement, not absolution. Then she looked away toward the future she'd built while he'd been busy taking credit for it. 3 weeks later, Victoria's new penthouse filled with morning light. She'd purchased the space the day after changing the locks on the old one, wanting something that carried no memory of Brandon. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked Central Park. The nursery door stood open, revealing soft yellows and greens, furniture carefully chosen for function and comfort rather than status. At 39 weeks pregnant, Victoria moved through her morning routine with the careful precision of someone who knew labor could start at any moment. Decaf chai latte, not the coffee Brandon had preferred. Wall Street Journal spread across the breakfast bar. Her laptop opened to Chen Technologies' IPO filing approved by the SEC 3 days ago. The headline made her smile. Chen Technologies IPO approved, initial valuation $1.2 billion. The subheadline was better: Victoria Chen to become one of few female billionaire tech CEOs over 50. 52 years old, about to give birth, about to take her company public, about to prove that midlife wasn't an ending but a transformation. Her phone rang. David Chen already at the office despite the early hour. Ms. Chen, Tokyo. He caught himself. Seattle office finalized the merger. 80 million papers signed overnight. She pulled up the documents on her laptop, scanning the terms. Excellent. What else? David's enthusiasm was audible. Forbes confirmed you for Woman of the Year. Cover shoot scheduled for after Elizabeth's born. MIT wants you for commencement speech next spring. And the Phoenix Fund applications are overwhelming 10,000 women in the first week. Victoria made notes, already delegating, set up a committee to review applications. First grants distributed within 3 months. These women have waited long enough. The doorbell interrupted her planning. Delivery flowers with a card in familiar handwriting. Congratulations on the IPO. You earned it. B.S. She stood holding the card, surprised by the gesture. No manipulation, no demands, just simple acknowledgement. The flowers went into a vase on the side table, not thrown away but not prominently displayed. Progress, perhaps, or at least civility. The second visitor arrived at 10 a.m., recommended by Margaret with the kind of enthusiasm usually reserved for life-changing discoveries. Thomas Reed, carpenter and craftsman, here to finish the built-in shelving Victoria had commissioned for the nursery. He appeared at her door carrying a worn leather tool bag, his presence immediately different from the parade of suited executives who usually sought Victoria's time. 62 years old, with silver hair cut practically short and hands that showed decades of physical work. Flannel shirt and worn jeans, clean but lived in. The tools in his bag were well used, maintained with the care of someone who respected their craft. His voice was warm without being familiar. Ms. Chen, I'm Thomas Reed. Margaret Wilson recommended me for the nursery project. Victoria gestured him inside. Please call me Victoria, and thank you for coming on short notice. Thomas walked through the apartment with the assessing eye of someone who understood spaces and how people lived in them. When he reached the nursery, he spent several minutes examining the half-finished bookshelf, the window angles, the way light moved through the room at different times of day. His observation was thoughtful, not critical. This corner gets afternoon sun, perfect for reading to her. If we adjust the shelf angle and add a cushioned window seat, you'll have natural light for story time. Victoria hadn't considered that detail. I didn't think about reading placement. Thomas pulled out a worn sketch pad, drawing quick lines that transformed into a design. Kids need sunlight, and mothers need comfortable places to sit while pregnant, nursing, exhausted from the beautiful chaos of keeping a tiny human alive. The sketch showed shelving that would grow with Elizabeth, lower levels now for board books, higher shelves that could be accessed as she grew taller, topped by storage for items too precious to risk small hands. I built one like this for my son Kyle. He's 28 now, architect in Boston, still has that bookshelf in his apartment. Victoria studied the drawing, impressed by the practical thoughtfulness. That's brilliant. Thomas's humility was genuine. I built one for my son. He's 28 now, architect in Boston, still has that bookshelf in his apartment. As he worked sanding wood with steady strokes, conversation developed naturally. Victoria found herself asking about his wife, the detail Margaret had mentioned. You were widowed. His hands didn't stop their work. Cancer 5 years ago. Dr. Sarah Reed, surgeon at Mount Sinai. Brilliant woman who saved hundreds of lives and couldn't save her own. He looked up briefly, his expression carrying old grief worn smooth by time. She was the smart one, made the real money. I was just a carpenter. But she saw something in me worth her time. Used to joke that she fixed people, I fixed houses. Both necessary. Victoria recognized something in his story, a parallel to her own journey. She sounds wonderful. Thomas returned to sanding the rhythm meditative. She taught me that success isn't about what you have. It's about who you are when everything's stripped away. When she got sick, lost her hair from chemo, couldn't work anymore, she was still herself, still brilliant, still kind, still the woman I loved. The observation hung in the air between them, neither pressing it into something more than shared experience. Victoria's question came carefully. "If you don't mind my asking the father of your child," Thomas's response was direct but kind. "He chose someone else, younger, prettier, supposedly better suited to his image." She touched her belly where Elizabeth kicked. "Turns out that was the best thing that could have happened. Losing what I thought I wanted made room for what I actually need." Thomas stopped working, looking at her with clear understanding. "My wife used to say something similar. Sometimes losing what we thought we wanted makes room for what we actually need." The words resonated with truth. Victoria was still learning to accept. That's beautiful. His return to work signaled the end of philosophical discussion back to practical matters. "The man who left you his loss. Any fool can see you're building something special here." Victoria gestured at the nursery. "The room." Thomas's smile was slight but genuine. "Not just the room. The way you talk about your daughter, your work, your future, like you've already decided she's your whole world and everything else is just details. That's the kind of love that builds empires. Not money. Love." Something stirred in Victoria's chest. Not romance, but recognition. Here was a man who'd loved a powerful woman and valued her for it, who built things instead of tearing them down, who was comfortable in himself and didn't need anyone to be less so he could feel more, not ready for anything beyond this moment. Too soon, too much, still healing. But someday, perhaps. The possibility existed, and that was enough. Brandon's studio apartment in Queens was 400 square feet of reality check. Murphy bed, 2-burner kitchenette bathroom with a shower so small he had to wash in sections. The window overlooked subway tracks, trains rattling past every 15 minutes with mechanical regularity. Furniture from Target assembled himself for the first time in his life, discovering that Allen wrenches were harder to use than they looked. 6 weeks after the divorce settlement, he'd found work. Junior analyst at Wellington Financial, a Chen Technologies subsidiary. The irony wasn't lost on him, working for his ex-wife's company earning $75,000 a year when he used to make $2 million reporting to a 35-year-old manager who didn't care about his former status. Sarah Kim, his supervisor, had been clear during the interview. "Your resume says CEO of Sterling Industries. That means nothing here. You'll start at the bottom, do actual work, and earn respect through performance. Can you handle that?" Brandon had said yes because he had no other options. Now, 6 weeks in, he was discovering he'd meant it. The daily routine was new, humbling, and strangely grounding. Wake at 6 a.m., no snooze button because he couldn't afford to lose this job. 45-minute subway ride reading business news while pressed between other commuters who didn't care that he used to have a driver. Work from 8 to 6, actually working, analyzing data, writing reports, attending meetings where he contributed rather than dominated. Sarah Kim was brilliant, demanding, and utterly unimpressed by his attempts to leverage past experience. When he'd suggested a different approach to a quarterly analysis, she'd listened, evaluated the suggestion on its merits, and rejected it with clear reasoning that showed she understood the work better than he did. Her feedback had been direct. "You're used to people agreeing with you because you were the boss. Here, you need to earn agreement with better ideas. Try again." He'd tried again, failed again. Tried a third time with actual research and data, and Sarah had approved it. The small victory felt bigger than any deal he'd closed as CEO. Therapy was court-mandated initially, but had become voluntary. Dr. Robert Chen, no relation to Victoria, though Brandon had checked, specialized in executives experiencing what he diplomatically called transitions. The question came in the 4th session, "Why did you need to feel superior, Brandon?" Brandon struggled with the answer, the truth he'd been avoiding for 58 years. If I wasn't better than everyone else, what was I? The admission that followed came harder. My father was a janitor, worked night shift at office buildings, died when I was 12 from a heart attack brought on by exhaustion and poverty. I swore I'd never be like him. Never be invisible. Dr. Chen's silence invited more. Brandon continued, words flowing faster now. So I became CEO, made millions, married a beautiful woman, had the penthouse and the cars and the status. But it was never enough. I always needed more validation. A younger girlfriend to prove I still had it. Bigger successes to prove I mattered. The next question cut deep. And when Victoria proved more successful, Brandon's voice cracked, I couldn't handle it, so I told myself she didn't exist. Her contributions didn't count. Only mine mattered. I made myself believe the lie because the truth was too threatening. His hands twisted together. But she was the one who mattered all along. She was the empire. I was just the front man taking credit for someone else's work. My father, the janitor, he had more integrity in his worn-out work boots than I had in all my expensive suits. The realization landed with weight. I threw away real dignity for fake status. Victoria's respect, our marriage, my integrity all gone. And for what? An affair with a con artist and a company I never really built. The woodworking class met twice weekly at the Queens Community Center, $30 a month, filled with hobbyists and retirees who treated the craft with reverence. Brandon was the youngest person there by a decade, the only one who'd never worked with his hands before. The instructor, a 70-year-old former union carpenter named Bill Martinez, had no patience for shortcuts. You sand with the grain, not against it. Patience matters more than speed. Wood doesn't care about your schedule. Brandon was building a rocking horse for Elizabeth, hand-carved from American maple. 6 months into the project, it was finally taking shape. Smooth curves, balanced runners, delicate details that required focus he'd never developed as CEO. Every evening after work, he came here sanding and shaping, learning that mastery required time he couldn't rush. Bill watched him work one evening, offering rare approval. You have natural talent. Why didn't you pursue this before? Brandon's answer was honest. I thought it was beneath me. Thought real success meant corner offices and expensive suits, not sawdust and calluses. He ran his hand over the maple, feeling the grain. I was wrong about a lot of things. The inscription he planned to carve underneath was already written in his notebook. For Elizabeth, from your father who's learning to be better. Love always, Dad. The gym became daily routine, not for vanity but for health. Brandon wanted to be around for his daughter, wanted to be physically capable of being a real father. He'd lost 20 pounds, gained muscle from actual work rather than personal training sessions. His gym friend Mike, a 50-year-old mechanic, provided the kind of straightforward friendship Brandon had never had. Mike knew the whole story, everyone did. It had been national news, but treated Brandon like a regular person. You're that Sterling guy from the news, right? Rough break, man. But hey, now you're real. That counts for something. It was the first genuine friendship Brandon had formed in decades. No networking, no agenda, just two middle-aged men spotting each other on the bench press and talking about their lives. Financial discipline came slowly but surely. Living on $75,000 a year meant budgeting every dollar. $1,800 for rent. $400 for food bought at regular grocery stores, not organic boutiques. $200 for utilities. $300 for Subway and essentials. The remaining $1,000 went into savings every month. 6 months of discipline, $6,000 saved. The goal was $50,000 for Elizabeth's trust fund. At current rate, 4 years away. Brandon had never worked toward a goal that long-term before, never delayed gratification, never sacrificed immediate comfort for future responsibility. The rocking horse was nearly finished after 20 weeks of patient work. Museum quality, Bill said. The maple was smooth as glass, painted white with pink details sized perfectly for a toddler. Brandon had spent hours getting the balance right, ensuring it wouldn't tip, making it safe for his daughter. Bill's observation was genuine. This is professional work, Brandon. You could sell these. Brandon shook his head, running his hand over the mane he'd carved strand by strand. This one's not for sale. This one's for my daughter. The words felt different in his mouth now. My daughter. Not the baby or Victoria's child, but my daughter. His responsibility, his privilege, his chance to do something right. The labor began at 2 a.m., Victoria's water breaking with cinematic timing 3 weeks before the IPO was scheduled. The contractions started immediately, strong and regular, her body efficient even in childbirth. Margaret arrived within 20 minutes, finding Victoria already dressed in comfortable clothes, hospital bag packed and waiting by the door. "How long between contractions?" Victoria checked her watch through a wave of pain. 5 minutes. We should go." Patricia met them at Mount Sinai, still in yesterday's clothes because Victoria's text had woken her from sleep. David Chen paced the waiting room with his laptop, running the company from the maternity ward because Victoria had asked him to, and he'd never refused her anything. James Fitzgerald appeared with his daughter Emma, 16, and wide-eyed at being brought to see the strongest woman in America, according to her father. The investigator had become more than hired help over these months, a friend, a father figure showing his daughter what real strength looked like. The room filled with chosen family, the people who'd stood by Victoria through the dismantling of her marriage and the building of her empire. Not Brandon's society friends who'd abandoned ship the moment scandal hit. Real people who valued her for who she was, not what she provided. The nurse's routine question came at 5 a.m. contractions, 3 minutes apart. "Should we call the father?" Victoria paused mid-contraction, gripping Margaret's hand. "Call James Fitzgerald. Ask him to notify Brandon. He can wait in the lobby. He can meet her after." Margaret's surprise was evident. "You sure Victoria's decision was firm despite the pain? She deserves to know her father, even if her father doesn't deserve to know her yet. This is mercy not for him, for Elizabeth." James made the call from the hallway. "Mr. Sterling, Victoria's in labor. She says you can come to the hospital but wait in the lobby. She'll let you meet Elizabeth after the birth." Brandon's voice came through thick with emotion. "Thank you. Thank her. I'm coming now." Dr. Sarah Kim, different from Brandon's boss, but coincidentally sharing the same name, took her position at 8:47 a.m. The delivery room was quiet except for Victoria's breathing, the monitor's steady beep, Margaret's whispered encouragement. The final instruction came clearly. "Victoria, it's time. One more push." Victoria drew on reserves she'd built over 52 years. The same strength that had built an empire in secret, the same determination that had survived betrayal without breaking, the same resilience that had transformed abandonment into liberation. One final push, and Elizabeth Chen entered the world. 8:53 a.m. 7 pounds 3 ounces. Dark hair and blue eyes that might change or might stay. A cry that announced presence without apology. A small voice demanding attention, declaring existence, claiming space in the world. "Doctor." Kim placed the baby on Victoria's chest, skin to skin. "It's a girl, perfect and healthy." Victoria's tears came freely now, joy mixing with relief and exhaustion and overwhelming love. "Hello, Elizabeth. Welcome to a very different world than the one I thought you'd enter. A better one. I promise you that." Elizabeth's tiny fingers grasped Victoria's, the universal newborn reflex that felt like trust. Margaret cried openly. Patricia dabbed her eyes with practiced discretion. In the waiting room, David Chen sent a company-wide email. "The CEO has successfully completed her most important project. Mother and daughter both healthy." The question came at 9:30, after Victoria had showered and rested. "The father is in the waiting room, still wants to meet her." Victoria made her decision. "Send him in. 10 minutes." Brandon entered carrying grocery store carnations, $8.99, all he could afford. His clothes were clean jeans and a button-down shirt, not designer, but respectable. He'd shaved, combed his hair, tried to make himself presentable for this moment. Seeing Elizabeth broke him completely. The composure he'd tried to maintain shattered the moment he laid eyes on his daughter. Tears streamed down his face without shame. "She's perfect. She's so perfect." Victoria's offer surprised him. "Would you like to hold her?" His shock was genuine. "Can I?" She handed Elizabeth to him, watching carefully. This was the test of whether he'd learned anything, whether he could be trusted with something as precious as their daughter. Brandon held Elizabeth with shaking hands, supporting her head properly. He'd researched online, watched videos, prepared for this moment. He wasn't sure he'd be allowed. Tears fell on the blanket as he whispered to his daughter, "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry I wasn't there for you or your mother. But I'm going to be better. I promise you I'm going to be better. Elizabeth grasped his finger, the same reflex she'd shown Victoria, and Brandon took it as forgiveness, though it was just biology. He looked at Victoria, gratitude and regret warring in his expression. Thank you for this chance. Victoria's boundaries were clear. You can visit. With supervision at first. You need to prove yourself, Brandon. Not to me, to her. I hope you become the father she deserves. Brandon left after his 10 minutes kissing Elizabeth's forehead, not trying to touch or hug Victoria. He understood the distance between them now, accepted it, perhaps even respected it. After he'd gone, Margaret spoke quietly. You're very generous. Victoria's response was firm. I'm not doing it for him. I'm doing it for Elizabeth. Every child deserves a father who tries. Whether he succeeds is up to him. The next morning brought an unexpected visitor. Thomas Reed appeared with the finished rocking horse from the nursery, hand-carved and beautiful, and a modest bouquet of wildflowers that cost $20 but showed more thought than Brandon's expensive gifts ever had. His greeting was warm but not presumptuous. Heard you had your baby. Congratulations. Finished the nursery, wanted to make sure everything was perfect for when you bring her home. Victoria, exhausted and emotional, felt tears prick her eyes at the simple kindness. Thomas, you didn't have to come. He set the rocking horse by the window where sunlight caught the smooth curves. Made it from cherry wood. Strong, beautiful, grows more beautiful with age. The pause was meaningful, like her mother. Thomas met Elizabeth with genuine warmth, no performance or obligation. She's beautiful, strong jaw. She's going to be a force. Victoria laughed, the sound surprising her. You can tell that already. His certainty was absolute. I can tell she's yours. That's all I need to know. Before leaving, he placed a business card on the side table. My number if you need anything. Carpentry, handyman work, or just someone to talk to who understands what it's like to do this alone. After he'd gone, Margaret's observation was knowing, he's nice. Victoria's agreement was careful, he is. Margaret pressed gently, and single. Victoria's redirect was firm but kind. Margaret, right now, I have everything I need. But her hand rested on the rocking horse Thomas had built, feeling the smooth wood, thinking about kindness without agenda, about a man who'd valued a powerful woman and been made better by loving her. Not now. Too soon. But someday the possibility existed. The NASDAQ opening bell ceremony happened 6 weeks after Elizabeth's birth. Victoria stood on the stage wearing a navy Armani power suit that accommodated her postpartum body without apology. Elizabeth was strapped to her chest in a carrier 6 weeks old and sleeping peacefully through the momentous occasion. David Chen stood beside her, pride evident in every gesture. Patricia Morrison and Margaret Wilson were in the front row, witnesses to the triumph they'd helped orchestrate. James and Emma Fitzgerald attended the investigator, showing his daughter what happened when someone refused to be diminished. Victoria's speech was brief, powerful, delivered with the authority of someone who'd earned every word. 20 years ago, I was a secretary earning $25,000 a year, told to be grateful for the opportunity. Today, Chen Technologies goes public with a valuation of $1.2 billion. She let the number sink in. This isn't just my story. This is the story of every woman who's been told to wait her turn, to not be too ambitious, to make herself smaller so someone else could feel bigger. Her voice strengthened. This is for every woman over 50 who's been told it's too late to start over. It's not. This is for every single mother who's been told she can't do it alone. You can. She looked down at Elizabeth sleeping against her chest. And this is for my daughter. May she grow up in a world where women don't have to hide their power to be loved. The bell rang at her touch, Elizabeth's tiny hand guided by her mother's. The stock opened at $42 per share, climbed to $58 within 5 minutes, reached $67 within 30 minutes, and closed the day at $72. Victoria Chen's net worth, $1.4 billion. The headlines wrote themselves. Single mother billionaire rings NASDAQ bell. From secretary to CEO, the ultimate comeback story. Victoria Chen proves transformation is real. Social media exploded with hashtags Victoria Chen Women Over 50, Phoenix Rising, Financial Independence. The comments were overwhelmingly supportive, women sharing their own stories of midlife reinvention, of discovering strength after being discarded, of building new lives from the ashes of old ones. In the press conference afterward, Jennifer Chen asked the defining question, "Ms. Chen, how does it feel to be a billionaire?" Victoria looked at Elizabeth, who'd woken up and was making small sounds. "Honestly, the number doesn't matter much. What matters is that my daughter will grow up knowing her mother built something real. That women don't need permission to be powerful. That being discarded isn't the end, it's sometimes the beginning." The follow-up came quickly. "What's your message to women over 50 facing divorce?" Victoria's answer was direct. "You're not too old. It's not too late. Financial independence after 50 isn't just possible, it's powerful. You have experience, wisdom, and frankly, you're done with everyone's nonsense. The best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's success. It's freedom. It's becoming who you were always meant to be." The Phoenix Fund launch happened 3 months after the IPO at the Manhattan Women's Shelter, where Victoria had donated her divorce settlement. $10 million committed for the first year, with plans to expand based on results. The program offered seed funding between $25,000 and $100,000, business mentoring from successful entrepreneurs, legal support for incorporation and contracts, and therapy for the trauma that divorce inevitably brought. Victoria wasn't just giving money, she was giving infrastructure for transformation. 20 women received first grants, their stories echoing Victoria's in different keys. Rachel Martinez, 58, opening a bakery after her husband of 30 years told her she'd never make it without him. Jennifer Park, 62, launching a consulting firm despite being told she was too old. Diana Thompson, 54, developing a senior care app, though her ex-husband said she didn't understand technology. Each woman stood at the podium sharing her story, proving that midlife wasn't an ending. Rachel's voice shook with emotion. "My ex-husband said I'd never make it without him. This fund proved him wrong. More importantly, I proved him wrong." Jennifer's certainty was absolute. "I thought 62 was too old to start over. Victoria showed me it's just the beginning." Diana's gratitude was evident. "For 20 years I was told I wasn't smart enough. This fund said, 'Yes, you are.' That changed everything." The applications had been overwhelming. 10,000 women in the first month from all 50 states, average age 56, average marriage length before divorce 24 years. The need was massive, the opportunity equally so. Victoria's closing remarks set the vision: Year 1, $10 million, 100 businesses. Year 5, 50 million, 500 businesses. Year 10, self-sustaining from successful exits. We're not charity, we're investment in the most underestimated demographic in America, women over 50 with something to prove. 4 months after Elizabeth's birth, Brandon arrived for scheduled visitation carrying 2 items, a legal folder, and the rocking horse he'd spent 20 weeks building. James Fitzgerald supervised a requirement Victoria insisted on until Brandon proved consistent reliability. The trust fund documents showed 6 months of discipline. $50,000 properly structured Elizabeth as sole beneficiary. Brandon, with no control, once deposited. Managed by an independent trustee, accessible when Elizabeth turned 18. Victoria reviewed the papers carefully. This must have taken months of saving. Brandon's admission was humble. 6 months. Living in a studio, taking the subway, cooking at home. All things you tried to tell me weren't beneath me. You were right. The rocking horse demonstrated even more museum-quality craftsmanship, white maple with pink details balanced perfectly for a toddler's use. The inscription underneath read, "For Elizabeth from your father who's learning to be better. Love always, Dad." Victoria held the horse, genuinely touched. "You made this." His pride was quiet, earned through actual work. Woodworking class. 6 months of work. Figured Elizabeth should have something from her father that wasn't just bought with money. Something made with my hands, with time, with love. Her response was careful but not cruel. Elizabeth doesn't need to know you as the CEO of Sterling Industries or as my ex-husband. She'll know you as her father. That's a clean slate. Don't waste it, Brandon." The supervised visit was brief but genuine. Brandon held Elizabeth, talked to her softly about nothing important and everything that mattered. He told her about the woman who was her mother, about strength and integrity, and the difference between status and worth. Victoria watched from the doorway, emotions complex. He was trying, genuinely trying. Trust would take years to rebuild if it ever could be. But he could be Elizabeth's father if he proved himself through actions, not words. The Sterling House restaurant looked exactly as Victoria remembered from that first night, the night everything changed. Same chandeliers, same white linen, same piano playing American jazz in the corner. But Victoria wasn't alone anymore, wasn't waiting, wasn't hoping for someone who'd never valued her. The table held her chosen family. Margaret Wilson, fierce and loyal. Patricia Morrison, brilliant and protective. David Chen, running her empire with dedication. James and Emma Fitzgerald, the investigator, and his daughter, who'd both become friends. And Thomas Reed, invited not as a date, but as someone who'd shown kindness when she needed it most. Elizabeth sat in a carrier beside Victoria, 4 months old, now gurgling and reaching for the candlelight with baby fascination. Henry Brooks approached the maitre d', who'd witnessed so many of Victoria's lonely anniversary dinners. "Ms. Chen, welcome back. Your usual table. May I say everything is different now?" Victoria's smile was genuine. "Everything, Henry. Thank you for your kindness during those difficult times. I haven't forgotten." His response carried warmth. "You were never alone, Ms. Chen. Even sitting here solo, the strength was always there. Congratulations on everything, the company, the fun, the beautiful daughter. You've become an inspiration." The toasts came naturally, each person offering something true. Margaret raised her glass. "To new beginnings." Patricia followed. "To truth revealed and justice served." David. "To empires built in shadows and brought into light." James. "To strong women raising strong daughters." Thomas spoke last, his words quiet but carrying weight. "To courage." Victoria gave the final toast, looking at the women and men who'd supported her transformation. "To all the women who've been told they're nothing without their husbands, may they discover they're everything on their own." Glasses clinked. Elizabeth made a sound that resembled "Mama," and the table erupted in delighted response. The baby was too young for actual words, but the coincidence was perfect. Across the restaurant, visible through the crowd, Brandon sat alone at the bar. Not drinking, he'd been sober for 6 months. Just coffee and a business textbook, studying for certifications that might advance his career. He saw Victoria's celebration, met her eyes briefly across the space. He raised his coffee cup slightly, acknowledgement, not intrusion. She nodded back, understanding, not forgiveness. Then both looked away, living separate lives that would intersect only through their daughter. Thomas played peekaboo with Elizabeth, making her giggle with delight. Victoria watched, feeling something stir that wasn't quite ready to be named. Warmth, possibility. The sense that healing didn't mean closing off forever. Margaret's whisper was knowing, "He's good with her." Victoria's agreement was careful. "He is." Margaret pressed gently, "And single." Victoria's truth was simple, "And right now I have everything I need." But her hand rested on the rocking horse Thomas had built, still in her apartment, a reminder that kindness existed without agenda, that some men valued powerful women and were made better by loving them. Not now, but someday. The possibility was enough. Victoria looked out the restaurant windows at Manhattan glittering in evening light. Somewhere in those towers, women were sitting alone at anniversary dinners, being told they contributed nothing, discovering they were being traded for younger models. Tomorrow, some of them might see her story and realize transformation was possible. Her thoughts formed the truth she'd learned through pain. Some endings are really beginnings in disguise. The best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's success, freedom, becoming who you were always meant to be. 20 years of hiding, building an empire in secret, pretending to be less so someone else could feel more. Now she was done hiding, done pretending, done being small. Elizabeth stirred in her carrier, making soft sounds. Victoria lifted her daughter, holding her close. "Mama's here, and Mama's never hiding again." The lights of the city twinkled like stars beyond the windows. Her friends surrounded her with genuine affection. Her daughter rested against her chest with perfect trust. Her empire was public valued at over $1 billion. Her future was limitless, built on a foundation of her own strength rather than someone else's approval. The journey from that first lonely anniversary dinner to this moment of celebration had been long, painful, and ultimately liberating. Victoria had transformed herself not by becoming someone new, but by revealing who she'd always been underneath the performance of being Brandon Sterling's wife. And Elizabeth would grow up knowing that her mother had been told she was worthless and proved everyone wrong. That financial independence after 50 wasn't a dream, but a reality Victoria had built with strategic patience and unwavering determination. That being discarded wasn't an ending, but could be the beginning of something far greater than what came before. Victoria looked at the faces around her table, her real family chosen, not inherited, and then at her daughter sleeping peacefully against her chest. This was victory. Not the courtroom triumph or the corporate takeover or the billion-dollar valuation. This moment surrounded by love that was freely given and gratefully received. The best revenge she'd discovered was a life well lived, and she was just getting started.